Welcome to Sideline Guideline.
Hot topics,
News,
fantasy football,
betting,
weekly recaps,
projections,
rankings,
injuries.
your one-stop shop for everything football.
Welcome to Sideline Guideline, episode number 2. We're at episode number 2. So today what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick recap of week 1. Yeah, we already done week 1. Well, as we're speaking right now, we are recording this right before the Monday night game. So I don't want to hear anything about the waivers. Oh, but what about this guy that happened on Monday night? What about that guy? No. We're recording before Monday night, so anything that happens tonight, unfortunately, will not be reflected in this episode. But if not, we're going to go through basically a recap of week 1, and then we'll go into some stinkers, people that really stank this week. And then we're going to go quickly cover some people that you should target in trades right away. So players that were really bad week 1, but they were just in a tough situation, or they're going to bounce back. And then we're going to finish with our top waiver pickup to help you with those waiver pickup for the week. So right away, I'm going to go right into the injuries. So we got Ryan Fitzpatrick, quarterback for Washington. He's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. Then we got Raheem Mostert, running back San Fran, about 8 weeks as well. Then we got Jerry Jeudy, Denver wide receiver. That looked pretty terrible, his injury. I'm not going to lie. He's going to IR, so at least 8 weeks. We got Mekhi Becton, whatever, that left tackle, huge left tackle for the New York Jets. I did see a timeline, but it's looked like it's changing. I saw 3 to 5 weeks, and then I saw 6 to 8 weeks. So we'll see on that one. If not, there's Rashad Penny as well, injured again, who no one could have expected that one. It's not like this guy's been injured every single year he was in the NFL. His timeline is still unknown. And then we got a tackle, Jedrick Wills from the Cleveland Browns that fell in that game. And then we got Michael Gallup that got banged up on Thursday. He's going to IR as well. So now it's looking like he might be out for 6 to 8 weeks. Anything you want to add on these injuries that maybe is big time injuries, or that's going to affect some of these teams a lot?
I think Mekhi Becton being out is a pretty big problem. I'm not quite sure how they're supposed to be able to run the ball without one of their main offensive linemen. And considering that they had big time trouble running the ball in the first place in week 1. So I think that's going to be a pretty big loss. And you're going to have to consider that if you're looking at any of the running backs on that particular team, especially one that was pretty high profile, right? So other than that, I mean, there's not any big surprises, right? I think Jerry Jeudy, real unfortunate. I think he's probably done for the season. I don't see, like, they put him on IR, so it's like the minimum 8 weeks, right? And it is an elongated season. We got an extra game this year, but I don't see him coming back. So if you got Jerry Jeudy in your fantasy league, you better be coming up with a contingency plan if you were relying on him. Because, I don't see him coming back. That looked horrible.
Yeah, that at first everyone thought it was a fractured ankle, but it ended up being a high ankle sprain. And we all know for these positions like running back and receivers, these high ankle sprains are just terrible, and you're pretty much done whenever you get one of those. The one I wanted to talk about is the Ryan Fitzpatrick, just because when he went down, there's a lot of people that are saying, oh, they're going to go get Cam Newton because Ron Rivera is there. I'm like, dude, they got Tyler fucking Heineke, whatever his name is, Heineke. What a gangster, man. That run play he did in the playoffs against the Bucks last year. Whoo. Now that was beautiful. And then he started playing well. Like, I mean, when Fitzmagic was in the game, my boy Ted and your boy McScoren had 0 targets. And then Fitzmagic one goes down, and then he gets like 4 targets in a row. I think I'm cool with that. I think I'm cool with that quarterback change.
Yeah, and, Heineke's a guy, like, he might even be worth, if you've got space on your bench because you've got guys that you're putting into your IR for fantasy, he might be worth picking up and taking a look at, because matchup-wise, he can run the ball.
Yep.
He can rush for touchdowns, and he appears to have some chemistry with Scorin McLaurin. So
And Logan
I mean,
Thomas.
and Logan Thomas. So number one, I think it's better for the receivers,
Mhm.
at least for their main guys in Logan Thomas and Terry McLaurin. But also, you know, from a fantasy perspective, you could pick up Taylor Heineke, stash him on your bench for a little bit, and then play matchups, right?
Yep.
Maybe if you don't have a super strong quarterback right now, you keep him there, and then, you know, he goes up against a weak defense, you throw him in there and see what he does. If he rushes for 2 touchdowns and throws 2 touchdowns, you're laughing. You're having a
Yep.
great fantasy week. So I don't know. It makes, I think Fitzmagic being out, I think it makes that entire team more interesting moving forwards, because you get a young quarterback that can run it. So their games are going to be more fun to watch, probably. And I think fantasy wise, I think they're better off as well.
For sure. All right. So now we're going to go into recap. I'm going to take the first one just because it's something that I had talked about in the first episode, and that was kind of proven in front of our eyes. I thought Sam Darnold was going to be very good and he was going to do great. And he looked really good in that game. It kind of took him it took him like about a quarter to get used to the pace of that offense, get used to the connection he's made during camp with those receivers. And then after that, it was just, he let loose. He let loose. He was good. He had that rushing touchdown in that revenge game. So for me, week 1, I really like what I saw from Sam Darnold, and I'm looking forward to expand already in week 2.
Yeah, and from the same game. What else was I talking about? I don't believe in Zach Wilson, and I think he kind of proved me right for the moment, at least. I think he was okay.
I mean,
But
he was
it.
okay. He was okay, like in the last quarter and a half.
Yeah, I mean, but especially in the early goings of the game, you can tell. I mean, maybe he's just adjusting to, obviously,
Yeah.
you know, the pace of the NFL and you know, the sophistication of NFL defenses. But I mean, to me, this is your guy that you're going to draft in the first round, and that's what he's going to go out there and do. And you're going to start him immediately. You're not going to have a contingency plan like some of the other teams. Like you see San Fran, they had a contingency plan in place. They're not putting their guy out there right away. Chicago, same thing. They're rolling with Andy Dalton, as inadvisable as that probably is. They're not rushing their first round quarterback. They're going they're doing the model that the Chiefs set of not taking your first round quarterback and throwing him out there to the wolves, of giving him a year to learn the system, learn it gradually. Whereas the Jets, typical Jets, they're going to just immediately throw the guy out there. And then honestly, he looked like shit for the first probably half of the game.
Yeah,
I don't
finished
see
the first half. He finished the first half with 9 passes completed out of 22.
9 of 22. So you're
9
under
out of
50%
22.
completion. And it's not like Carolina has a ridiculous defense. They have a decent defense.
They have a defense,
but they're not ridiculous.
Okay defense.
I specifically started their defense in fantasy because I was like, I don't think this kid's got it. First of all, I don't like him as a player. I wouldn't have drafted him if I was the Jets. I don't think he's going to have success in the NFL. And second of all, the Jets overall, they don't have, like, it's not like they surrounded him with really, really good weapons or anything either. So even if he was great, is he going to score a lot of points? And sure enough, I managed to get 11 fantasy points out of the Carolina defense. So, hey, I might just follow the Jets all year with defenses and see where that gets me in terms of fantasy.
Hey, why not? All right. So my second point I wanted to recap, touching this recap, is the Najee Harris situation. Just because I have so much invested in Najee Harris. But when I was looking at the in-depth statistics of that game, I saw that he played 100% of the offensive snaps. So he was on 100% of the snaps in offense. He did show a couple of good runs towards the end of the game. Overall, I think he was just getting his feet wet, like trying to see what it is to be running against some talented defenders instead of just running against a bunch of college guys. It's definitely different, especially that O-line is horrible. Like that O-line is completely horrible in Pittsburgh. You saw it, man, when Big Ben was getting rushed, and Big Ben couldn't move around. He was just kind of hobbling around, jumping and falling to the ground. But yeah, so for me, this part of the recap with Najee Harris is basically just to reiterate that it wasn't a great day for fantasy football, but I'm still very hopeful about Najee Harris having a big year and being a huge piece of that offense. With as we saw, that defense was monster. So I still think even if they had that shitty O line, that they still might make it to the playoffs. I think they're a playoff team with that defense. The defense is just incredibly ridiculous. Too much talent in that defense for them not to make the playoff.
Yeah, their defense is going to carry them. Like they'll go as far as their defense, right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't like I personally, if I tried to get Najee Harris in like every fantasy draft that I was in, I just couldn't. He went way earlier than I was expecting him to go. I thought he was going to go towards like the later end of the second round, and I'd be able to scoop him up in the second. But he's going mostly at the end of the first round. Couldn't grab him. I wouldn't be worried about him, man. He only had 16 carries, right? What's going to happen? Like he had some good runs at the end of the game, so it's like he's figuring it out. And 16 carries only. What's going to happen if they give him 25 carries next game? His next game is against guess who too? Another a team that doesn't have nearly as good of a defense as Pittsburgh, Las Vegas. Raiders defense. Cool. The Raiders defense is a perfect opportunity for him to really find his legs, start figuring out how to hit some holes. The Buffalo defense.
By the time we're done this episode, when we start watching the Monday Night Football and we find out that Raiders are finally good for some reason, like they did some magic spell, they paid some people off, had to deal with the devil, and now they're good.
Yeah, maybe they cloned Khalil Mack and they have a new copy of him in their linebacker core. But no, let's be honest. I feel confident saying this. 45 minutes before the game starts, their defense is going to suck, and that's Najee Harris's chance to really start finding some holes, start running. Buffalo was never going to be an easy one for him. They have a pretty good defense. I'd say they're definitely in the top half of the NFL in terms of defense right now. That was never going to be an easy game for him.
Yeah,
never. Sure. So I wouldn't worry about him if I was one of his owners, or if I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I'm not worried about him. I think he's going to be just fine.
For sure. So before we go to my next one, did you have one that you wanted that stood out for you that you want to bring up?
Yeah, Green Bay and New Orleans. What happened to Aaron Rodgers? Like, is he still on vacation mentally? I mean, he's always been a gunslinger, right? Like he'll throw some ridiculous throws, but that one interception that he threw that was basically a punt from his own end zone, I don't know who he was looking for, or if he was literally just trying to punt it with his arm, because he nowhere near anybody. I mean, fantasy wise, I think he scored. I didn't even look because I wasn't playing against him. 6.
Yeah.
I thought
3 points.
I thought it was even less than that. Yeah, I thought it was like 3 points, or 3 or 2.5 or something like that.
Yeah,
like
I brought it up that Justin Fields and Trey Lance had more fantasy points than him and only played 2 snaps.
And Jameis Winston on the other side throwing 5 touchdowns. Yeah. Like, what the hell, man? If you told anybody like prior to that game, you said, hey, Aaron Rodgers is going to throw no touchdowns and Jameis Winston is going to go throw 5. I would bet the house that that's not happening. I would literally bet my house that that's not going to happen. Oh, yeah. And it did. So, I mean, I don't know what's up there. I think maybe Aaron Rodgers being.
I still don't trust the hype of famous Jameis.
No, never trust. Coming from a Bucs fan, never trust the hype of famous Jameis, because it's going to happen where he's going to start throwing up some balls where you're like, what is that ball placement? But, he also didn't throw for that many yards. It seems like the Saints really game planned to make him effective. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that 17 times. I don't think so. But they game planned to make him effective. And Green Bay they were sluggish on defense. Their defense looked like they were sucking wind from the first snap. And then on offense, it doesn't help when Aaron Rodgers is just giving them the ball back all the time.
Yeah. I mean, and I fully agree, except that the only thing that I would say, and I would quote the great quarterback we're talking about, RELAX, relax. As he had said, just like that a couple years ago when Green Bay were stinking up the whole NFL in the first couple of weeks, told everyone to relax, and then he came back and they were a playoff team that year, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, they were horrible, but I'm not too worried. I'm not too worried, man. He just needs to get his groove. I think not being there during camp affected the way he played on Sunday, I
Yeah,
think he's going to be
probably.
fine. Aaron Rodgers owners in fantasy, do not worry. Green Bay fans, do not worry. Your boys are jumping back week 2 for sure. So my next recap point is something that you'd probably thought you'd never, ever hear me say, but that Eagles defense didn't look that bad. I mean,
Pretty good.
ATL kind of like, because ATL was able to get like a couple of drives in at the beginning, and they moved that ball up the field, and then after that, man, they made some good stops. Like that Eagles defense is, I think, needs more credit than people are giving to them. Like everyone that's talking about this game since the game happened is just, well, ATL is garbage. Well, yes, they are, but that being said, I mean, like on the first drive, like Calvin Ridley had like 5 receptions or something like that. I mean, Calvin Ridley did not leave the game injured or anything like that. They had to shut him down, and that's what happened. They shut him down for the rest of the game, and so.
Yeah, it's not like Atlanta has 0 weapons. Like they lost Julio, obviously, huge loss, but they have some weapons still, and then they added Kyle Pitts, and Philly basically shut him right down.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt Ryan is still Matt Ryan. He's a good quarterback. He has really good ball placement. He can find his receivers, and he was early on too. Like the first couple of drives, he was slinging it to Calvin Ridley, and it looked like to me after the first couple of drives, I thought, all right, Calvin Ridley's going to have a day, and then he didn't. So yeah, you got to give credit to the Philly defense, man. They looked real good, and Jalen Hurts looked pretty
man,
good.
that I'm not going to speak about because I still think it's a fluke, man. I'm maybe just a hater, but I think he played very well. I'll give him that. I don't think he's a franchise quarterback still. I need to see more from him to think that he can take that franchise somewhere.
If he can do the same thing that he did against Atlanta like regularly, then yeah, then maybe he'll win you over.
Oh yeah. So while we're on the subject of Eagles and the Eagles quarterback, why don't we jump to the Indy-Seattle game to talk about this ex-Eagles QB. So for me, man, in that Indy-Seattle game, the one thing that stood out for me is that Jonathan Taylor is a beast. Jonathan Taylor is just really, really good. He played really, really well that game. I mean, he had a decent like fantasy day. Like he ended up with like 14 points or something like that in a half PPR, and he had a touchdown call back on a bullshit. Like I think it was a holding. It was a bullshit holding call. So he would have had a touchdown to add to that. I think it was like 10, 15-yard touchdown. And also what was good about this game is that for Jonathan Taylor owner in fantasy is that the man had like 6 targets. So he is being used as the main rushing running back. And also he didn't have the most targets, but it's still like Nyheim Hines, I think, beat him out by like 2 targets or something like that. So for me, that's huge for Jonathan Taylor. And my comments on Carson Wentz would be that, I mean, he didn't look terrible, but he was a bit of his old self. I don't know if you watched a bit of that game, but he was holding the ball way too long. Like he got sacked like 2-3 too many times, like that. He was just like holding the ball out there like for 4 seconds, and then he's not throwing in. It's like, dude, you're playing in the NFL. If you can count to 3 in your head and the ball is still in your hand, you're screwing up. You're screwing up your team.
Yeah, unless you're Kyler Murray or Patrick Mahomes and you got some serious escapability, which, you know.
Kyler Murray, man.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Jonathan Taylor in fantasy, and, you know, I was, as usual, whenever I do a draft, I usually afterwards I read all like the recaps and I start reading stuff on people where they're saying, you know, people that you should have stayed away from, people that you should have drafted. And Jonathan Taylor was showing up on a lot of lists. Mm-hmm. People are like, don't draft this guy. He's going too early. I picked him up anyways because I got him in a pretty reasonable spot. And yeah, the fact that he's getting that much of a share of actual passing targets as well is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Like at this point, with the way that Carson Wentz is using his running backs, I think both of them have value in fantasy. I think Taylor and Nyheim Hines, you could reasonably say Taylor is like, you know, a lower end RB1, and
Yep.
Hines could be like, an
A
RB2 or
flex
maybe
play.
even maybe a flex, depending on who else you got on your roster, right?
Yeah.
So that's like that's interesting, and it's kind of unsurprising from Wentz because he does like to dump the ball down, and now he, with Philadelphia, that's why Zach Ertz had so much value, because those short little routes is what Wentz seems to like more than anything. So I think with his running backs in Indy now, it might be a great year for them fantasy wise. I don't think it's gonna be a great year for Indy overall as a team, but fantasy wise, yeah, their running backs might have a good year. Jonathan Taylor
Yeah,
might
man.
have a career year in terms of total yards from scrimmage.
Yeah, I think Taylor's on the way to having an amazing year rushing wise, and but yeah, man, that Indy defense is not that defense that we saw last year. They got open deep like twice by Tyler Lockett. Man, Tyler Lockett like opened up that defense and just like slapped them around. You have so on to the next. So we're done with this game. Did you have any game you wanted to talk about? What's your next
I
topic
mean,
that's on your mind?
we could talk about my Buccaneers taking down your Cowboys.
Yeah,
I don't
I guess
know. I mean, that was an earlier game. It's been a few days. How are you feeling
I
about
guess
it?
we can talk about the fact that pass interference is not reviewable anymore, or
Mm.
that Greg the leg cannot kick anymore. We can talk about
Oh, so
either of these things.
it's the ref's fault and it's the kicker's fault, right? It's not
I mean,
that's it.
Dak passed for over 400 yards and he had 3 passing touchdowns, as I predicted. And I'm gonna go say it out right there. I think Dak is getting the MVP. Dak is
I
the
think Dak is
MVP
getting
of
the
this
MVP.
season. Yeah, I've already put some money on that. I hammered it. I fully trust in Dak being the MVP just because, as I saw him week 1 because let's be honest, man, that defense isn't an easy defense to play against. And he did very well. Maybe he could have done better in the red zone, but I mean, it's not his fault if, like, on 3rd and 4th against the Buccaneers D-line and linebacker core, the coach decides to go for a running play. Like, that's what you're going to do
Fair
in
point.
that's what you're going to do in the red zone against that D-line and those linebackers. Like, so, I mean, yes, he could have been better. He could have been better in the red zone. He missed a couple of red zone opportunities with, like, against like a team like the Buccaneers that are the Super Bowl champ. You need to take these opportunities if you're going to take them down, which they almost did. But again, almost doesn't mean anything. They lost the game. They have 0 in their win column and they have a 1 in their loss column. So, I mean, week two, they're going to go big in. And I think like Dak said to Tom Brady after the game, he's like, we'll see you again, because they're going to meet each other in the playoffs. And I think they're, depending on the standings, it would be a great matchup for the NFC Championship.
Yeah, obviously it'll depend on the standings. I wasn't like super thrilled with that game from a Bucs standpoint. I mean, we had 2 cases of Butterfingers there. Ronald Jones ended up with a negative fantasy day as a result of his fumble, and then we also had what's his name? Basically tip pass it directly to the Dallas defense. Fournette, yeah, basically tip passed it. So 2 cases of the Butterfingers that really could have cost us a lot if, as you mentioned, your kicker was able to actually kick.
Yep.
But that being said, I like Tom Brady. Tom Brady looked good. He looked every bit of what we expect from Tom Brady. If his running backs were, holding onto the ball, then that could have been a more convincing win. But I didn't love it from the Bucs, but looked good. We're on the right track. We got the 1 in the win column. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, man, the next thing that we need to address, that we need to talk about, and that game was one of our games to be on the lookout for fantasy-wise and football-wise, and that Tennessee Titans and Cardinals game. Did you see that man, Chandler Jones, manhandle a pro left tackle, a all-pro left tackle, manhandled him and got 5 sacks? Like, even like Taylor Lewan like tweeted after that like, he apologized to his teammates. And that's like, when you have an all-pro apologizing like to his teammates, like on social media, and that means because You had a day. You had a day.
Well, Taylor Lewan is also, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's the highest paid offensive lineman in the league right now. He may have gotten surpassed. He was the highest paid offensive lineman in the league, like as of like a year or two ago. He may not be anymore, but he's up there, right? So that's why he apologized, really, is because like he knows that everybody's looking at him and going, you make how much money and you're going to allow this guy to get 5 sacks on you? But that's also, that's Chandler Jones. Chandler Jones is a freak athlete. I mean, you see the way he dominated a guy like Taylor Lewan. Like, we make jokes all we want about him being like one of the highest paid linemen and getting dominated like that.
So
like, how can you let that happen?
So he's actually like 10th or 12th overall.
10th or 12th now. Okay, so he got surpassed by a few people. Still, if you're going to be that high up on the list, you're making that much money.
For sure.
That's why he felt like he had to apologize. But again, it's Chandler Jones, man. Chandler Jones, when he's healthy, is one of the best in the game. I think he'd be mentioned.
That sled, man.
He broke a tackling sled. His brother is one of the greatest fighters to ever live, John Jones. I mean, that family, Arthur Jones also played in the NFL as well. All 3 brothers, like elite athletes. That family is like, they got some good stock, man. They make good athletes. And he, if he had been healthy his entire career, Chandler Jones, he'd probably be mentioned up there, next to Aaron Donald as possibly one of the best defensive players in the game or best players overall in football altogether. Yeah. So it's not surprising to me that he went off, but 5 sacks, man.
That's crazy. If he stays healthy and plays the whole 17 games, how much sack is he gonna finish the season with? Like, that's what I want to know, because it's not gonna slow down. Because what are they gonna do? They're gonna put more attention to him and leave JJ Watt alone on the other side of the line. That's not a better situation for any offense.
It's catch-22 against that team on defense, man. It's like either you're single teaming both of them and then you're exposed depending on who gets beat that night, or you're double teaming one of them and then the other one's going to not get enough attention, and it's going to cause some problems for you. I mean, I'm kind of like, a lot of people have been taking Arizona as like a dark horse, not necessarily a dark horse, but as like a favorite to win the Super Bowl. And honestly, I think there's a good chance that they might be getting deep into the playoffs at the very least. I still think my Bucks are repeating, but that's a scary team, man, and they're probably going to be scary for a while.
They look real good, man, with Kyler Murray. That one play that he escaped the pocket. Oh, man, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. Did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about before we go into our week 1 stinkers?
No, I think we covered all of them. I think the only other quick one was that almost tie in Cincinnati. I mean, I thought I was watching that and I was like, I was literally, I think I was texting our Dynasty League group chat, and I was like, there's going to be a tie in Cincinnati, and it came close to being a tie. And honestly, I wanted it to be a tie because I don't like either of those teams. I was like, please just tie, and then I could make fun of you on Twitter for the next like week. But they avoided it. Got a kick in.
Yeah. Before we go into the stinkers, just one shout out I want to give. I want to give a shout out to my boy, Teddy Two Gloves Bridgewater. Man, he killed it. He was called the most passive quarterback, the most boring quarterback. And Mans just went out there and completed 28 out of 36 passes for 264 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. You think Teddy boring? Well, yeah, boring. All right, so if we're going to go into the stinkers, we touched it a bit earlier, the stinkers, the pew, hew, hew. I'm going to pair my first one, all right? So it's a duo of stinkers. You might see already where I'm going there, and it's Matt Nagy and Andy Dalton. Them boys stank, and Matt Nagy needs to be fired, and Dalton needs to be benched or cut, either or. I don't care. Justin Fields was there he threw the ball twice. He completed beautiful passes, and then he rushed for a touchdown. And then you have Andy Dalton fumbling the ball, throwing a bad interception. And you're just like, I'm just going to keep the old man in. And I'm not going to put in my first round pick quarterback that's been looking super good. I don't think, man, you might want to add something to that, but I don't think there's anything left to add apart from the fact that Justin Field needs to start week 2. If he's not starting week 2, I'm hoping Andy Dalton gets benched halfway through the game.
Yeah, I mean, I get what they're trying to do there. They're trying to follow, like I said earlier, they're trying to follow that Patrick Mahomes rubric of, let him gradually get in instead of throwing into the wolves. But, from what we saw,
he looks ready.
I don't know how you can let Andy Dalton keep, destroying your team. Look at David Montgomery, looked fantastic. David Montgomery looked
real good, man.
Great. I mean, it's not often
running in between behind his blockers. Yeah. He wasn't being too aggressive. He wasn't being too passive. He was being patient, waiting behind his linemen, his blockers on the inside, outside, and then making these cuts behind his blockers, as all great running backs always do. You always see the great running backs are the ones that stay behind their blocker as long as they can, and then they make their cuts behind their blockers and then go into the open field. But yeah, so stinker, Dalton, Montgomery, very good. Do you have what's your first stinker?
My first stinker has got to be somebody I invested some serious draft capital in our dynasty league. 6th overall pick, Derrick Henry. Not impressed with that game, honestly. No. Not impressed with that game whatsoever. I get it. They kind of fell behind early, and then game script didn't benefit him at all. But also, he looked sluggish. I mean, his first 7 carries, I want to say, he had 7 yards. So, I mean, part of that is obviously credit to the Arizona defense, but at the same time, he looked sluggish. And I think, to me, I also want to heap some blame, so I'm going to do the same as you, and I'm going to throw in a second stinker. I'm going to go to the coach, Mike Vrabel. What are you doing not letting him get any snaps during the preseason? This is your thoroughbred running back, right? And he's not 21 years old. He's 28 years old now. He's got to get his legs warm, right? And I'm sure we all see this guy's Instagram. We all see him on the internet. He works out. He stays in shape. But there's a difference between, being in shape and being in game shape. And I think being in game shape, especially when it comes to football, it requires you to get some reps in. So, why not? Why did you not have that guy? I was concerned about it. As soon as I heard in the last preseason game that he was not going to get any of those snaps, I was like, why? Why are you not going to let him at least get a couple of runs in? I know you don't want him to get hurt, but, if you're worried about him getting hurt, then you might as well wrap him in bubble wrap and just try to save him to the playoffs, right? Because there's always a risk of getting hurt in football. It doesn't matter if it's preseason or regular season. So they might as well have let him get some reps in. I think that was the problem. But he's on my stinker list because he didn't look good. Didn't look like somebody that you want to be drafting in the first round. And he was drafted in pretty much every fantasy draft.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I mean, for myself, I had just put the whole freaking Tennessee offense on my stinker list. They were bad. Tannehill didn't look good. Julio Jones was nowhere to be found. He had 2 catches for like 29 yards, like 2 catches for 29 yards, something like that. Like AJ Brown had like a touchdown, but like, man, he needs to do AJ Brown things if this offense is going to get anything done. Like they were down by a lot of points, so they were passing the ball heavy from an early point, and they still ended the game with just 13 points. Like even Detroit put up like 30 something points because they were down by a lot. Yeah, man. So for me, Tennessee Titans are also on my stinkers list. And for me, my last thing on my stinkers list are my fantasy teams. I've just put my fantasy teams on a stinkers list just because you took me by the ankle and flipped me, like Hulk did with Loki. That's what you did to me in our redraft league. In Dynasty, there's still some tiny hope. But yeah, so in all of my leagues, man, most of my leagues I've done pretty bad. Like even like most of them I'm already out for week 1. 2 of them that I lost like by 40, 60 points. So yeah, so my fantasy teams are on my stinker list. Did you have any other stinkers?
Yeah, the entire New York Giants team. No, most of them anyways. First of all, the organization in general. Why did you trade away your pick? Like, you believe in Daniel Jones that much that you're going to let Chicago move up? And yeah, you got some extra draft capital out of it, but you're going to let Chicago move up. Chicago takes a guy in Justin Fields that looks like he's, he could be another Patrick Mahomes, could be a very legit quarterback in this league. Yep. So that you can keep the guy from Duke that nobody heard of until you called his name at the draft. Smart play. And then Saquon Barkley, what was going on there. Didn't get a
think
whole lot
he-
of rushing attempts.
Yeah, I think he only
I
got like 4 carries.
Yeah, he didn't have. Well, I think he had more than 4 carries, but he didn't look great. He didn't look great. I don't really want to put him as a stinker himself, like personally, because we know he's coming back from a very serious injury. So you can't necessarily expect him to just come out and light it up right away, like Adrian Peterson did when he came back from the same injury. But I mean, just that entire organization, really, the entire team, from the coach up to the GM, up to the owner. What are you guys doing, man?
Yeah.
What are you guys doing? I don't know.
So basically, he had 10 carries, 26 yards, 3 targets, 1 reception for 1 yard. Not a great day.
Game script doesn't help there either. When you're down, right, you're going to run the ball less. But you would think that with a quarterback like Daniel Jones, who doesn't really do a whole lot, you might want to put the ball in the hands of your thoroughbred running back. Knee problem or no knee problem. Again, like I said with Derrick Henry, if you're worried about him getting hurt, well, better wrap him in bubble wrap and just hope you make the playoffs, which you're not making the playoffs anyways. So if that was their reasoning is, well, we don't want him to get hurt, so we're going slow with him. It's like, well, he's still on a football field. He's still on a football field against gigantic super athletes that, can smash into him any moment and grab him by the waist and flip him over. So, whether it's 10 carries or 20 carries, are you trying to win or not? Because to me, I'm looking at what I was watching that New York game and I'm like, are you guys even trying to win? I'm not sure that you are.
For real, man. For real. All right. So I think that caps it off for the stinkers. Unless you have anything else to say.
That's it.
That's it for this week.
I wanted to I wanted to put Cleveland on the stinker list for blowing a lead, but honestly, they look pretty good.
Yeah, they look pretty good indeed. All right, so we're gonna go into the next segment, which Drake is gonna take care of. He is going to go over some one or multiple players to target in trades for fantasy. That basically the premise is that they had in so first week, so you might be able to buy them on the low before they come back up in value with some big old games. So take it away, Drake.
Well, my top guy, and I know I'm going to seem biased for this because of the jersey that I'm wearing, but my top guy would have to be Mike Evans. Mike Evans, pretty bad week. Didn't do very much, but he also didn't get a lot of targets. We saw Antonio Brown was getting the lion's share of the targets from Tom Brady. So the reason that I would target Mike Evans is because I think there's going to be a lot of frustrated, panicky fantasy managers that expended some draft capital on him, and they're just like, well, screw this. I want to get rid of him. I want to move on to something else. So I think you should try to trade for Mike Evans if the price is right. And I say if the price is right because he's going to have off games like this, right? He is. Tampa has too many weapons for all of them to always have good fantasy games. So everybody right now is foaming at the mouth over Antonio Brown. Oh, he's so good. He's so good. Yes, he is. But he's not going to have games like that every time either. So if you can get Mike Evans and play him based on matchups, right? I think that other teams, because of the speed that Antonio Brown has that Mike Evans doesn't have, I think eventually the double teams are going to start shifting over towards him, and that's going to leave Mike Evans in single coverage. And what does Mike Evans do to single coverage? He eats that up. He eats it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. All Tom Brady has to do is put it up high, and Mike Evans is going to go up and get it. And, there's going to be games where he's not going to be great, but there's going to be games where he single-handedly helps you win. And he could end up being a league winner. You get towards the end of the year, guys are banged up. And if you get the right matchup with Mike Evans and he's on your team, it could end up being a league winner for you. So try to trade for Mike Evans if the price is right.
I mean, for me, the only thing I would add to that is the most important part to take away from that is if the price is right. Because right now, I don't know that I would personally go myself on trying to get Mike Evans, even he's one of my favorite receiver in the NFL. It's just that room of receiver for me is way too crowded that I wouldn't want to invest anything in that unless, like you said, the price is right.
Yeah, the price is key. And then there's another guy, if the price is right. Had a pretty shitty week one. But this one, he's not on a team that I like whatsoever. We're talking about Ezekiel Elliott. I, again, think there's going to be a lot of panicky fantasy owners that took Zeke in maybe the first round. I know in some drafts he was sliding out to the second round. So people who took him in the second round, maybe they'll be even more willing to part ways with him because they didn't have to expend a lot of draft capital to get him. But I think that you're going to see, again, a lot of panicky fantasy owners that are going to look at that stat sheet and they're going to go, oh my God, he had a bad week 1, and they're going to try to get rid of him because they're going to have flashbacks to last year when he had a bad overall year. And what those panicky people are going to be forgetting is that he was playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have a very scary front four and a very scary linebacking core. The Dallas Cowboys were game planning for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So they were trying to throw more. They were trying to get RPOs going so that Dak would have some options to either run it or pull it out and throw it. They were trying to play. They played a really good game actually against the Buccaneers and almost actually ended up winning the game because of the way that they scripted it. And unfortunately, that script came at the expense of Ezekiel Elliott's fantasy viability. So I think you're going to have panicky owners again. And one more time, if the price is right, try to get Zeke, especially if you need some help at running back and you're a little bit stacked at receiver. See what you can maybe offer them and, see what people are willing to deal, because I think Zeke might be, I think he's going to bounce back from that. And I think when they get a better, more favorable game script, they're going to feed him.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. Nothing to add.
Beautiful. So third one, and this one going to be a little bit more convoluted, but any and everybody on the Green Bay Packers. We talked about it earlier. Horrible game for them. Aaron Rodgers looked like crap, and they did next to nothing against the New Orleans Saints. But I'm here to tell you, I think that's an anomaly. I don't think that's going to be the case for them all year long. I think, as you mentioned, PL, Aaron Rodgers being late to training camp caused some of that. He was off on his vacation, having his little spat with ownership. So I think this was basically an extension of the preseason for him. You saw him afterwards in his press conference, and he didn't do the relax thing like he did before, but he did mention that one of the things he said that really struck me there was, and just the way he said it as well, was he's like, man, this is one game and we got 16 more. And I was like, yeah, that's right. You do have 16 more games. And I do not believe that team is going to be that bad in every single game that they play. In fact, I think they're going to get way better. And I think it's going to happen pretty quick. Devontae Adams had a bad game. Valdez Scantling had a bad game. Randall Cobb. Aaron Jones had a bad game. Randall Cobb.
Five attempts for 9 yards. 5 attempts for 9 yards for our first round running back.
And nobody who really knows and watches a lot of football thinks that Aaron Jones is that bad. He only got 5 carries. Why did he only get 5 carries? Well, they fell behind early, and then they were trying to throw the ball, and Aaron Rodgers, his timing was off. His accuracy was off. Everything was off. Even Aaron Rodgers is somebody that you might be able to target in fantasy. Let's say you're a little bit weaker at the quarterback position. People might be giving him away for pretty low based on how bad he was in week 1. You might want to pick him up.
Yeah.
You definitely, if you can get your hands on Devontae Adams, try. That's going to be pretty expensive. I've got Devontae Adams in one of my leagues, and I'm not giving him up for, anything less than a stud running back. But again, any and everybody on the Green Bay Packers, if you see somebody, try to get them. Again, if the price is right, make sure that you're not giving up too much in order to get them. But I think the price is going to be pretty low, because I think a lot of, again, panicky fantasy owners are going to be looking at that team and going, I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole after that game against the Saints. And you might be able to profit from that.
For sure.
Buy low.
And as always, man, if on these trades, on anything like that, if you have trade offers that you want to get us to review, hit us up on Instagram, hit us up on Twitter. We will answer any start, sit, or trade questions at any time. Did you have any other trade target?
Well, the only other one is one that I think that you should try to trade away.
Okay.
I don't want to give away too much, because this is a player that I happen to have, and I'm going to be trying to trade him away and see if anybody's interested. But it's Miles Sanders from the Philadelphia Eagles. I think
he had a great game.
He did have a great game, but I think you need to sell high, because I'm looking at the way Kenneth Gainwell, the rookie that they've got, was like vulturing red zone touches. That's concerning to me. It's one of the reasons why in that same league I picked up Kenneth Gainwell late, because I'd heard a lot of good things about him, and I kind of wanted to, in the dynasty league especially, just have him on my bench and just be like, okay, let's keep this guy and let's see what happens over in Philly, because I don't honestly think that Miles Sanders is long for that team. I think eventually he's going to either be traded or he's going to walk and go somewhere else, because I think, looking at their training camp and looking at the things people have been saying about Gainwell, it almost seems like they think he's the future. And the fact that he was vulturing red zone touches is, a huge red flag for me.
Especially that early on in his career,
Especially that early on in his career. So I don't think Miles Sanders, he might get traded somewhere else and then end up being a stud, right?
That's
But
quite
I think
possible.
for now, I think if you have Miles Sanders, I think you should, put him on your trade block, entertain some offers, see if somebody else has got some bad running backs and wants to upgrade a little bit. But again, make sure your price is right and make sure you got a replacement for him too, because
For sure.
otherwise you're going to be in trouble.
For sure. Interesting. All right. So now that is done, we're going to go into the waiver pickups. So how we're going to go through this, I'm just going to, by position, say my list of guys in the order that I would prioritize them. And then after that, you can just tell me if you agree with me, if you would switch some, have a different order or whatnot. So we're going to go right away with the QB. And again, I don't want to hear on any comments or anyone messaging us like, well, he's been drafted in my league. What I did is that I took only players that are below 50% ownership on Yahoo. All right. Below 50% ownership. So the first one, first QB, in first place, I have Trey Lance to pick up. Then I have Justin Fields. Then I have Tua. Then I have Sam Darnold. Those are my top 4 waiver pickup at quarterback. Do you agree with the order? Is there one on there that you would just not touch at all, or one that I didn't mention that probably for a fact has under 50% ownership?
I agree with your order 100%. The only thing I might do, and this is tough to say, honestly, I'm not even sure I would do it, is maybe I would put Justin Fields above Trey Lance.
Mm-hmm.
I think Justin Fields has a better chance of becoming the starter sooner because of how bad Andy Dalton is. But at the same time, Trey Lance looked great in the snaps that he did get. And he's, in my opinion, he's far better than Jimmy Garoppolo. I have him in 2 of my fantasy leagues. I have Trey Lance on my bench because I'm expecting him to have that job. But either one of those 2, I mean, maybe I'd flip those. But other than that, I totally agree with your order, right? Those are some good quarterbacks to maybe look at picking up. The only one I might add on the end there is Taylor Heineke. I think he might be worth it.
As you mentioned earlier.
If you can't get somebody else and you're hurting at quarterback, you might want to snag him.
For sure. All right. So now we're going to go into our running backs. And in order, I have Elijah Mitchell. I have Mark Ingram. I have Tony Jones Jr., Carlos Hyde, and Wayne Gallman Jr. First thought?
Yeah, that's precisely the order that I would have given as well. Elijah Mitchell. The only problem with Elijah Mitchell, right, is that for him, it really depends on injuries, right?
Well, so Mostert is out for 8 weeks. And I mean, like, Trey Sermon got healthy scratch, and we were thinking maybe that was because of the game plan or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But Kyle Shanahan came out and said that it was flat out just because Jermichael Hasty and Elijah Mitchell beat out Sermon at training camp. So, I mean, now we're going to see Trey Sermon on the field, most probably since Mostert is out. But I'm thinking that unless Sermon does something very spectacular, I don't think Elijah is going to lose that starting position. I think he played very well. And, I mean, maybe if it happens with Sermon, I think it's going to be maybe a similar timetable that we had preseason with Mostert in the backfield, that we were all like, everyone was thinking maybe Sermon was going to come into that starting role by 8 week or 9. I think that's still possible, and it might be even more possible. But also, you got to think that Jeff Wilson Jr. is coming back week 6 or week 8. So that backfield is going to get pretty crowded, and I think Shanahan is going to ride the hot hand, which I think right now is Elijah Mitchell after that sick game. Then for me, Mark Ingram has just had like 26 touches, like carries and catches, like 26. That's a high volume that you're looking at. Tony Jones Jr. is played very well backing up Kamara, and the way we saw the Saints use that running game with Kamara and Jones, you know that if something happens to Kamara, Tony Jones Jr. could be RB or an RB1 in the RB1 territory very easily. Carlos Hyde, reason why I have him in there, he had the same amount of touches as James Robinson. And as I had mentioned in preseason, Carlos Hyde, his coach in college was Urban Myers. So maybe Urban Myers really liked the guy because Carlos Hyde was really good in college. So that's why I have him here. And then Wayne Gallman Jr. Well, you know that, Drake, that I've always been a big fan of Gallman Jr. The man can do it all. He was drafted to be a workhorse running back by the Giants, but then the next year they had Saquon Barkley fell to them, so they drafted Barkley. And of course, man, like Gallman is good, but he's no Barkley. But that's why I think I would still, if you have a spot on your bench, go stash Wayne Gallman Jr. Because the way Mike Davis is played, man, he didn't look good against that Eagles defense. But as I said, man, the Eagles defense played really well. So, but I still think that by week 4 or 5, the job could be his. Anything you want to add on these running backs or anyone that I'm missing?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. Sweet. I don't know who else to pick up, honestly. I mean, you could pick up Phillip Lindsay if you want, but I don't see that working out for you, so I'd avoid him.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to go to the receivers then. I have in order Rondell Moore, Jalen Reagor, Sterling Shepard, Terrace Marshall, and AJ Green. Any comments, any order do you flip before I go into explaining why I have them there and why they should be picked up?
I don't think I would change your order. I might have an ad in there. Okay. I think that that Juwan Johnson character out of New Orleans, man, he made some pretty spectacular catches.
Yeah, he's a tight end.
Green Bay. Yeah, he's a tight end / wide receiver. If you look at him on Yahoo, if I go there right now, he's listed as wide receiver and tight end.
Huh, interesting.
So he's in just the fact that he's listed at 2 positions on Yahoo is interesting enough that, you might want to stash him on your bench. He had 3 targets and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So they like him in the red zone. And like I said earlier, New Orleans is game planning for the way that Jameis Winston plays. So I see them, using that guy. He's a big dude. Again, no guarantees with him. He's kind of you're taking a flyer because this is a guy who just recently became a tight end this year, but he might be worth it. But as for your order, I would leave it exactly like that if you're looking at pure wide receivers.
For sure, because so Rondell Moore, he already had like 4 catches or something, and they're going to start using him also in the running game, just because also Connor and Chase Edmonds weren't that great in that game, and they know that they can use him as a gadget player out of the backfield. Jalen Reagor, he had 6 targets, and he's going to be a starting receiver in that offense, so he's going to be on the field a lot. Sterling Shepard really killed it. I think he had like 7 or 8 catches, which is quite good. Terrace Marshall, for me, I've been big on Terrace Marshall since the day he got drafted. I have him in almost all of my fantasy leagues, in all my fantasy teams. I got a late round pick on him. The dude is like 6'2", 200-some pound, and he ran a 4.38. You don't get guys that fast, that big, that are that fast. And man, your boy AJ Green, as anyone that watched that game, Cardinals are going to be deadly. So I think anyone on that team can be a valuable asset. As you can see on my list right now, I have Rondell Moore and AJ Green to pick up. They're on the same team, and I would advise that you get your hand on either of these guys. You should be good for late in the season for other receiver option whenever needed for bye weeks or when injury happens. All right, so now last part of the waiver column, the tight end. I only picked 4 tight end. It goes as follows: Jared Cook, Cole Kmet, Tyler Kroft, and Dalton Schultz. I got Jared Cook first just because I wasn't sure at the beginning of the season, just because Jared Cook has always been disappointing fantasy-wise. But, man, he was going in that offense that was just feeding targets to receivers and tight ends, and it seems like that's what's going to happen. Herbert seems to like him. He threw the ball his way 8 or 9 times. Same thing is happening with Cole Kmet. I think that Cole Kmet, even if he didn't have a huge day fantasy-wise, he was getting targeted, and he's a huge talent. So I think as soon as Justin Fields becomes the quarterback in Chicago, he's going to be a stud tight end. I think he could finish top 15 tight end easy. Tyler Kroft seems to be one of Zach Wilson's boy. I mean, he did in the preseason. I had talked about Tyler Croft as being a sleeper in the in our first episode. He had 3 touchdowns on 3 catches in the preseason, and in week 1 he had 4 targets and caught these 4 targets. So I think Zach Wilson is going to start relying a lot more on him, just because he's probably going to get told by his coach, when he keeps making those mistakes, he's getting those incomplete pass down the field. His coach is going to tell him, you got that security blanket, you're huge tight end, just feed him the ball, get those 5 yards, and get the ball, the chains moving. And the last one, Dalton Schultz, well, it's because Dalton Schultz and both Blake Jarwin were both undrafted, because we had no idea what the Cowboys were going to do tight end wise, which one was going to be the preferred one, because Dalton Schultz was good last year when Blake Jarwin was injured, but Blake Jarwin is back. But it seems like it's going to be Dalton Schultz that's going to be the number 1 tight end. And as you just saw, that Dak, I think, threw the ball almost 50 times. You definitely want a tight end on an offense that's throwing the ball 50 times in a game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with your list 100%. The only thing I might do, even though he had less fantasy points, I might put Cole Kmet above Jared Cook, because I think like Chicago seems to look at him as like a potential star. Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. I think when Justin Fields gets in there, which eventually he's going to do, I think there's going to be a lot of balls going his way, especially with a guy who likes to get out of the pocket versus a guy in Andy Dalton who's limited in terms of mobility. So, yeah, I agree 100%. That's the only change I might make. I might flip Cole Kmet up to the top.
Right on. So that was the waivers. These are going to be, so the episode should be available. You're going to see it. You're going to hear this when the episode's already live, so it doesn't matter at what time it comes out. But yeah, so this should help you with your waivers. Did you have anything else that you wanted to cover before we call it quits?
No, I mean, got a game starting in about 4 minutes here, so I'm going to go work out and watch it at the gym, but we'll see what goes on there. And I hope that your little Baltimore running back there gets 0 points.
Tyson is going to ball out. All right. So I guess that's it for episode 2. Make sure to, as always, go follow us on Instagram and Twitter. It's both at Sideline Guide. We're going to be putting a lot of content there, some posts, some stories. As you might have seen, if you already follow us, I posted something like 6 player prop bets on Sunday and was correct 4 out of 6. So that's not bad. It's over 50%. So if you want to make some money, go follow us. So you make sure you make sure that you don't miss any of these prop bets. We're going to be updating them. We're going to be posting some information there too. So subscribe, go follow us, do all the things, no matter wherever it is. If not, we'll see you for our next episode. So this is coming out Tuesday, and then we're going to have our episode that looking forward to week 2. That's going to be coming out on Thursday. So make sure that you, as always, subscribe us and put the notification on so you don't miss any of these episodes, and get ready for your week 2. So nothing else to add. Peace out.
That's it, man.
Have a great week.